Greetings and salutations. You are listening to the Into the North podcast, where we take a look at the competitive side of the Commander format, also known as cEDH. I am one of your hosts, Noobzors, and today I am joined by my co-hosts, Null.
Hello.
Sick Robot.
What's up?
And Spleenface.
Hey, everyone.
So in this episode, we are going to be covering Should You Be Playing Stax? But before we get into that, what have you guys been up to since the last episode? Anyone want to kick things off? Yeah?
Sure. Some of us went to a tournament for EDH doubles, where you play with a partner. It's not two-headed giant. You sit across from each other, and it's like a very competitive event. So Null and I went, and we came second.
Myself, I went with a friend of the show, Turnip. It's my partner, and it was our first time, and we went
first time.
Yeah. No beginner's luck was granted to us. Yeah, we went 1-2, sorry, and we didn't prize.
Oh, and this month Planeswalkers were legal commanders, so I played Tezzeret at the Seeker, and
just to give a context for how
was good.
Different it is from like regular EDH. The winners of that tournament were playing. One partner was on Boros, and they're the Boros partners from Battle Bond. So,
Sylvia and Korvath.
Yeah, and then the other partner was on Bruce Tarl Crom, and double strike hurts a lot when you're at 30 life, starting at 30 life.
Turns out if you can eliminate one of your opponents, it's very easy to win 2 versus 1.
Yeah. Sick, anything for you?
I've been back at it online recently, testing out a new absolutely sick brew that I have no license to talk about right now, unfortunately.
Top secret.
But if you guys want to check it out, there's a post on Reddit. It was a collaboration with me, Sigi from the Lab Men, and then good old Lurker and Shaper from the cEDH Discord. And we made something that is frankly great, and I'm sure Nell can attest to this.
Yes.
It's sick, and it's got some awesome tech. So hold out for a week or so, and we'll get the spicy tech to you on the podcast. But until then,
its only weakness is pre-order prices.
Yeah. No, way to just give away. Okay, but so without further ado, let's jump into housekeeping, and I'll kick things off. So as we mentioned in our last episode, we just launched a Patreon, and this Patreon helps cover costs like hosting fees, allows us to improve our audio quality by upgrading our microphones, and eventually down the line hiring a professional editor for the podcast. As incentive for your support beyond just the standard rewards, we decided we'd add a stretch goal of doubling the number of episodes we release. That's right. If we get $50 in Patreon support per month, we will be releasing bi-monthly episodes of the podcast. And just to say this, like, this podcast really is just a passion project for us at this point. So before we double down on our time commitment, we really want to be sure this is something you guys are interested in. So if you are interested in more frequent episodes of the podcast, please be sure to pledge whatever you feel comfortable with at patreon.com/IntoTheNorthPodcast. And with that, let's give a shout out to our newest patrons. So our first patron is Timmy T1000. We also got support from the Meta Worker, aka Jim from the Spike Feeders. We got another Patreon in Scotty G, and you can find him on twitch.tv/ScottyKnowsMTG. And last but not least, the Mystic Remoras, who also have a Twitch and YouTube page, and you can find them at the Mystic Remoras on those platforms. Finally, Sick, our last bit of housekeeping.
Yeah, we are going to be releasing the Modern Horizon set review soon. TM. Yeah, you guys heard it right. You were getting double the Into the North this month. Sort of a toe in the water.
A sneak peek.
A sneak peek of what's to come.
A little taste.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty huge.
So this is what it'll be like if we hit that patron goal. So Okay, then moving on to new developments. Sick. Do you wanna kick things off with this?
Sure. I got a twofer here. Got a couple of really, really awesome videos from the Lab Men. for 2 decks that I have collaborated with Sigi from the Lab Maniacs, Sigi Lobster on the Discord. Curious Control and Shufflehawk both have deck techs up right now. You guys should probably go check them out. 2 awesome decks. I know the Shufflehawk one is about a month old. Unfortunately, the last episode was recorded and dropped right before that release. So I had to wait a month to shill it, but you guys can go check that out right now because it's pretty sick. We go through all the ins and outs of it, get really down in the nitty gritty of the deck, and pretty entertaining in my opinion.
So that was recorded a while ago and just releasing now. So it is a bit out of date on some of the newer tech.
But a lot of the main core ideas are still in place, and it's still
great place to get
a great intro to the
yeah,
deck.
Yeah, exactly.
And then along with that, Dan and Sigi did a great deck tech on the Curious Control / 4 Colour Rashmi / 4CR / whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Best Thrasios file deck ever created, IMO. TBH. If you love casting some good old-fashioned card advantage engines, counter spells, and board wipes in cEDH and doing some great old control stuff and spending like 10 turns winning the game, this is probably the deck for you.
Do you enjoy other people not playing Magic? Do you enjoy saying the words no, nope, hold on, I have a response?
Thinking. Alright, I'm going to cast Reap, targeting 3 spells. I know one of them is a counter spell. Give me a bit.
Okay, so next up, Spleen.
So we got the Consultation Kess shell, or the Kess Consultation Core, depending on where you look. And this was a collaborative effort between Wedge, Redshift, and Sug, and they're some of the best Kess Consultation players. And so they came together and they made a list that has sort of the core of the deck, which is the cards that every list should be running, and then they sort of added some meta calls and tech choices and things that you could be running. And it's a really useful resource, and it's kind of a new way of looking at decks where they actually already laid out which tech choices you can be making rather than sort of explaining why they made the ones they made. And it's awesome to see people collaborating, people who play the same decks collaborating to make resources like that, and hope we see more of it.
I'm going to just tag on to that. Something that could have been under housekeeping as well is that our next special episode is actually we're in development, and we're in the phases where we're kind of making the announcement and getting questions from the audience. So we're going to be we're working with some players who are in the experts in the consultation archetype. I don't know. Should we announce who we have, or?
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea.
Sure. Okay, so it's going to be Sick will be hosting, and we're going to have Redshift, Sug, and Wedge, who are going to be on as our expert guests. So you should go check out the Grixis Mean Girls server, or it might be on some other servers.
We'll try to get up as many panels as possible. I think we'll probably have one on our server for you guys to ask questions on. Definitely, at least. Definitely Grixis Mean Girls server. And then I'm sure you guys can ping into any one of us and submit questions directly if you need to.
Yeah, so this is a prime opportunity to ask your not just basic intro level questions about the deck or the archetype, but to actually get into the nitty gritty details here. So yeah, you can look forward to that coming soon. TM.
Yeah. if you ever wanted to ask if you should really be playing that Blood Crypt in your consultation gel, or if it might be better spent on another land.
Yeah,
now's the time.
And so I'll cover the next new development, and that's the Twisted tournament hosted by the Mystic Remoras. That's going to be at the end of June, I believe. We'll have a link to the actual poster with all the information in the show notes for this episode. But it's a webcam EDH tournament. Great prize support all the way like first through 8th, and it's 32-man tournament. So if you're feeling confident, go for it. By the time there's only a few slots left in the tournament, so if you hear this, there might still be time to register. But if not, you might as well check out the stream that's going to be happening when that tournament goes on. And finally, our last new development. Null, do you want to get this one?
Yep. So, a very old pillar of Magic collaboration, MTG Salvation, will be closing this coming July, and archiving. MTG Salvation's been around since some formats didn't even have names. We estimate, 100, 200 years old.
Yeah.
At least, I mean, really.
With radiometric dating, there's a solid window.
But that doesn't mean there's not good stuff in there. So
take
advantage of that resource.
Put on your archaeologist hat.
It's sort of sad to see it go.
Forums.
It is.
I know. I think that's definitely how a lot of people get into the EDH format in general, let alone just cEDH. Seeing all those old primers and stuff. I think like some of Dan's old stuff on there. Definitely the Cobblepot Boomweaver Carador primer up on there is a huge one. I think that got a lot of people into the format. So it's sort of sad to see that go. But you guys should check it out while you still can.
You'll be able to get your post. Get your
burning questions.
Try to be the last person to have a post on there. Okay, so let's get into our main topic, which of course the overarching topic is, should you be playing Stax? And so we're going to break this down into 3 subtopics. First being, what is Stax, for those who might not know what that is. Topic 2, the history of Stax in cEDH. And topic 3, which is Stax in the meta right now. So let's jump into our first topic. What is Stax? So Splane, do you want to kick things off?
Sure. So Stax is a form of proactive control deck that looks to use permanent-based hate to attack its opponent's resources and stop them from executing their game plan. So it differentiates itself from typical reactive control decks by, instead of playing something like a counterspell to counter a threat, you play a Winter Warp so they don't have the mana to play that threat in the first place. And then you... when everyone else is having difficulty playing the spells they need to be playing, you try and find a way to sneak a win in there and end the game.
Okay, so where is this this term Stax coming from? It originates from smokestacks, right? Like that's it.
Yep.
Yeah, guys, right?
Yeah.
You can keep going on that if you want to.
I'm
keep digging
good.
that hole.
Someone correct me here. What am I missing?
So Stax, for those uninitiated, are...
Hey man, I was setting this up. No need to beat me up. I'm setting this up for you guys.
For those new to that,
For those who haven't had a lot of experience with the game so far, Stax, the original name of Stax comes from a early deck in Type 1 called the $4,000 Solution, which was basically in a format dominated by storm decks and things that wanted to kill you real fast. Turn 1, turn 2 is a good time frame for that. There wasn't really a lot of ways to stop yourself from dying to a Tendrils in the stack with 10 copies above it. So what ended up happening was, I don't know who actually put it together initially, but there was a deck put together that relied on the strength of Mishra's Workshop to power out strong artifacts early, like Tangled Wire, Trinisphere, I believe Winter Orb, Static Orb at the time. Just really powerful artifacts early to basically lock decks in their tracks before they could get to the win, and then just sort of beat them to death with good old-fashioned cards. And of course, the $4K solution coming from the fact that, Mishra's Workshop isn't exactly the cheapest of card now, and it certainly wasn't at the time either, although it might have exploded in price by a bit.
Inflation and, the speculator cabal doing their... Damn it, Rudy!
So, as you might be able to guess, the $4K solution doesn't exactly roll off the tongue when you're trying to list off what deck you're putting down on a deck sheet or saying online or whatever. So what ended up happening was people moved the name from $4KS to $T4KS. And if you sort of squint real hard and read it in elite speak, that looks a lot like Stax. So that's sort of where we get the name of the archetype from then.
And for reference, when this deck was first created, Trinisphere was a new card. It had just been printed in Mirrodin in 2003.
Yeah. So just to maybe give you guys we gave you kind of like a more technical definition of Stax, give you the origin of the word, but let's give you some examples of some Stax pieces that actually see play in cEDH. So we've broken them down into some categories that, I mean, ultimately are kind of arbitrary, but because there's so many different ways you could categorize these, and this is far from definitive. But this is what we've got. So we've got the categories as mana denial, taxes, hosers, spell restriction, and card denial. So Null, do you want to read the mana denial list we've got?
Sure. My specialty, actually. Mana denial consists of things like Blood Moon, Back to Basics, Orbs, Tanglewire, Armageddon, and cards like Mana Vortex.
So the orbs being Winter Orb, Static Orb, Stasis.
Yeah, Stasis-ish.
Yeah.
Just really stuff that stops you from either like untapping your lands, just really using your lands at all to good effect. Yeah.
Next category, we've got taxes. Spleen face.
So under taxes, we have Sphere of Resistance, Thorn of Amethyst, Trinisphere, Thalia, as well as stuff like Tabernacle, Kitaki, and good old Grand Arbiter.
Yeah.
The hosers category are cards that really hose particular strategies. So in here, you've got things like Null Rod, Stony Silence, Curse Totem, Stranglehold, Even Mind Sensor, Humility, Rest in Peace, Grafdigger's Cage. So, lots of grave hate, deck tutoring hate, artifact hate, and creature ability hate. Things that are all very powerful in cEDH.
In general.
Yeah. There's obviously more specific ones that might see play in stuff like Modern, where, people might play something like an Ensnaring Bridge to hose creature-based combat. But that's something that in cEDH, there's a bunch of cards we haven't listed that just aren't going to see play in cEDH.
Yeah, it's the same way that like you won't see Stony Silence and main boards in Modern, but you will see Ensnaring Bridge, where Ensnaring Bridge will hit a majority of decks in the formats that it sees play in, and Stony Silence is sort of not, whereas in cEDH it's sort of the other way around, where like combat isn't really that much of a consideration a lot of the time, but a lot of the time people are playing broken mana rocks, and you can pretty consistently count on being able to hit those. Next up, we have the category of spell restrictions. By this we mean stuff that sort of like stops you from playing multiple spells in a turn, or seeks to sort of limit how much you can actually play out of your hand at any given point in time. So this includes stuff like Rule of Law, Aethersworn Canonist, Mana Maze, Eidolon of Rhetoric, Arcane Lab, stuff like that. Just either things that strictly say you can't play more than one spell a turn, or stuff that stops you from efficiently getting more cards out of your hand.
Yeah. And then our final category of card denial, Noel, take it away.
Yeah, so under card denial, these are cards that try to prevent you from cashing in on that nice card advantage. So cards like Spirit of Labyrinth, Notion Thief, Alms Collector, Shades of Mephistopheles, Narset, Ginja-Taxis, and
i.e. cards that this side of the table hates firmly.
And then there's sort of like cards that I guess you could place into categories, and obviously we didn't name some other cards that do see play in cEDH. Off the top of my head, like Root Maze does see play. I guess that could go into a mana denial. And then you've got this one is a bit hard to place, but Possibility Storm, something that sees play in Godo and Narset, just kind of meddles with what your opponent's doing. It doesn't exactly do any of these categories yet. It maybe fits under spell restriction.
It messes with their head, not their resources.
It messes with their will to live.
Taxes the will.
Yeah.
Would you like to pay the extra one?
So let's get into the history of Stax and cEDH. So all the members of this cast started playing like true cEDH roughly in the summer of 2017. So we decided to be prudent to reach out to some of the more seasoned members of the cEDH community. So big thanks to Shaper Savant and Infinite IMOC for answering our questions and helping us get a better understanding of how the Stax meta evolved over time. So there's really... Okay, so my understanding is that there's really like 3 eras-ish, right?
Yeah, like 3.5. But like really 3 like main ones. And we sort of start with the history of Stax and cEDH, really at the start of cEDH as the concept, which starts in the Partial Paris era, named after the Partial Paris Mulligan. I'm not going to go into the full detail on it right now, but the idea is basically the Partial Paris Mulligan allowed decks to more aggressively and more consistently look for specific pieces in their deck. So generally at the time, it was a lot easier to find things like a Mana Crypt in your opening hand or a Soul Ring in your opening hand or specific Stax pieces. So just before getting into the Stax at the time, I'm going to give an overview of the general meta at the time just so we can contextualize what Stax was dealing with. It was mostly Storm and mid-range decks. So Storm, basically like Jaleva at the time, really like Brian's Pile of Broken line of like train of thought at the time. And then we have like mid-range, usually like Golgari based decks, looking like stuff like Gerard, Gave,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it.
Carador, was that around?
Sort of. He wasn't really like fully developed at the time.
Yeah, okay.
To the best of my knowledge, but around there. And then you also have, I believe, Narset at the time is where she really cut her teeth and made the name for herself at this point in time. So really, if you really think about it, it's a pretty limited range of strategies that see play at the time. So if you think about it, it's actually pretty easy to target that range of strategies with specific Stax effects. There wasn't really a diversity of effects that you needed to be able to play into a meta. So you're looking at like Rule of Law effects, Grave Hate effects for the mid-range, like Grave decks, and then like Curse Totems, tax effects. Just like the general good old Stax Mana Denial effects. So really at the time, what a regular Stax deck looks like is trying to power out like a Trinisphere on turn 1 with a Mana Crypt and like aggressively mulliganing toward that stuff. Or like doing like turn 1 Static Orbs or like turn 1 Thorn of Amethyst, that kind of stuff.
Who are the primary Stax commanders in this era?
So really, from what I can gather, the general consensus is that at the time, Derevi was really the only good Stax commander, which is sort of understandable considering how, like, even now, Derevi's weakness isn't really, like, the ability by which she breaks Stax, because she does that, or breaks parity on Stax. She does that really well, and she still did that at the time really well. Derevi plays on the Tangle Wire stupidly easily. Same thing with Static Orb, same thing with Winter Orb, all that good stuff. And, like, doesn't care about, like, even, like, Stacks either, like, stuff like, Smokestack. Because she just puts herself back into play with her ability. Like, it's very easy for Derevi to play through Stacks. So at the time, it's a lot easier for Derevi to also, like, beat face and all that, because you can just lock people out of winning a lot easier, and then you just win with beats.
Winning with beats.
What a time.
cEDH.
You can't see, but air quotes. So that's the general partial Paris era,
and then the delineation just being post partial Paris.
Basically, as soon as we switch to the Vancouver Mulligan, it gets a lot harder to consistently go turn 1 Mana Crypt Trinisphere. Surprisingly enough, when you can't just aggressively mulligan for both of those pieces every game. So you lose. So first of all, you lose the ability to consistently find access to like a set of 2 or 3 Stax pieces to hit on a specific strategy every game. It's a lot harder to find like consistently like one of your Rule of Laws every single game. Because 3 cards with Vancouver Mulligan just like isn't enough to always find in your opening hand, like it is for the Partial Paris Mulligan. The other issue that this brings along is it also becomes a lot harder to find your win conditions. It's a lot harder to actually like find the cards in non-black decks to like actually win the game without like having to go through an entire beats war and everything like that. So you see a downtick in Derevi by a lot now, right? Because it's, first of all, you can't find your consistent like early game plays to start logging people out of the game. And then you also have a really difficult time actually finding your win conditions now.
That's something Derevi still struggles with to this day.
And like even with like the new like Nexus of Fate stuff, it's still like super difficult to actually find your win condition on time in a timely manner. So that's really where this problem starts with Derevi. This is also like basically every other Stax deck takes this hit. So they really have to figure out how to actually work around that. And I think this is where we see the rise of like black-based Stax decks. and also like hate bearer based Stax decks, because as we all know, creatures are really easy to tutor. You can get to your creatures very easily compared to like artifacts.
So you're leaning less on the mulligan and more on your just redundant copies in the tutors.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Stuff like that. So this is where we start to see like Carador take off. So Boonweaver Carador starts basically rocketing in popularity at this point. It has at the time a very solid win condition. It's fairly easy to get access to that compared to some of the other combos. And then you also get to, recur your hate bears, and just play like the Abzan core of hate bears that still sees play to this day.
Yeah.
So this is really, I think, again, from what I can gather, really the popularity peak of Stax, at least like close to true Stax at this point. And though it might be lower power level than Partial Paris and probably lower power level than now, I think a lot of people were still really interested in it this time, because I think this also sort of coincides with the boom in popularity of people getting into EDH in general, especially cEDH.
Yeah, this is like Return to Ravnica time, right? Wasn't that like the big boom in
Believe so. Yeah.
Boonweaver Giant was printed in M15,
yes.
Which was, I believe, immediately after Theros.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So around that.
That was a couple years later, or a year later. Yeah,
but like
Return to Ravnica, Theros, Cons.
It's where we start like seeing like cEDH actually like become an idea, like a real like concrete idea, right? And start picking up players. And then immediately everything changes after this. Everybody was sort of settling in. They're like, okay, this is pretty nice. I get to play more stuff. This is pretty good.
We're still in Eldrazi Winter, guys.
And abruptly, we get the 1-2-3 punch of partners being printed, and then Kaladesh block and a Hulk-on ban all at the same time. So suddenly,
Kaladesh block was first.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kaladesh was released.
we can redo this.
Doesn't matter.
In a 7-month span, Kaladesh block was released, partners were printed, Aether Revolt came out, and then Hulk was unbanned.
Yes. Which
from September 2016 to April 2017.
Suddenly you get Paradox Engine, Isochron Scepter plus Dramatic Reversal as a combo. Hulk, Razaketh. Well, not at the time. Razaketh coming a bit later. Definitely.
Okay, but I mean,
right there.
not Kaladesh.
Yeah. But like that whole time frame, you suddenly everything gets access to better win conditions, and then also you actually get to play 4-color, which is a new thing. And also somehow the 4-color commanders are better than any of the 3-color commanders at the time. So it's a huge shift in like how people actually play the game at the top level in cEDH. It really goes from having to rely on your commander, which was at the time, like it was like you really wanted to play like a powerful commander for a specific strategy, to where you can now just sort of play with Tymna X and jam staples and just have a good consistent draw engine in the command zone. So this is really where we see stuff start to shift out of hard stacks. This is
hate bears. Hate bears still now like even probably more strong than they were in Carador meta. Even Mind Sensor draws me cards.
Wow.
And honestly, not just one.
Like it is actually just a Dark Confidant. But yeah, like we start to see the shift away from like sort of like stacks to lock people out of the game, to more stacks to use to further your own game plan, really, to like just buy yourself more time.
Just to like, basically to tie your opponent's shoes together.
Yeah.
Not the softer legs. Just
what's over there? But yeah, like it's really like where we start seeing that slowdown and really using stacks to buy time to get a win condition online. And this is also where we see like really efficient win conditions start to make their way into stacks builds. Where before, I think a lot of stacks would have like fairly expansive value and combo packages, just to make it like actually easy to get into winning position, win the game.
Yeah.
Your value engine has like mostly been offloaded to the command zone now. So you don't need to dedicate as many deck slots to that. And with the new printing of especially Felidar Guardian for Birthing Pod lines, you get to make your combo a lot more compact and a lot easier to get access to. So this is now when we see the development of Bloodpod and cEDH. Sort of the modern generation of what we would consider a Stax deck in cEDH.
I mean, there have been so decks like Yisan have been something that you could have been building for a while, right? With just sticky and stacks pieces, and you're just a creature tutor engine like solid. But like these are like the new school of like 4-color stacks with efficient win conditions, and really much more resilient and higher value engines. So if your Yisan dies, or it doesn't just immediately die to deluge.
Yeah. There's sort of like the thing before, like, especially, so I'm pretty sure, like, especially having access to 4 colors worth of cards is really what also helps make the win conditions better here. Because, again, for the Birthing Pod lines now, the Kiki-Jiki package is a lot more accessible because you have Birthing Pod plus Felidar Guardian plus Kiki-Jiki for a win off of Tymna, and of course Karmic Guide, but you also now have access to Buried Alive piles in the same deck. Yeah. And historically that didn't really exist, right? Like you didn't have enough colors, or if you did, you were in 5 colors and you didn't really have a commander in the command zone. You had like really a placeholder. Just a color enabler, and then also, cEDH, printing a Paradox engine makes it like really actually a deck that can win the game and becomes a threat at the table. It's really an untap and win commander now. This is really the shift away from playing
hard stacks
and stacks that you have a hard time breaking parity on, to stacks that maybe is a bit less effective overall, but you have a lot easier time breaking parity on, and it's a lot more targeted, right?
And so this is something that's going to continue into it's an idea that's going to get refined more as we talk about stacks in the current meta.
Yeah.
But before we do that, it's time for everyone's favorite segment. Good check! So in this segment, Spleen is shaking his head.
If it isn't already your favorite segment now.
Shaking his head, tremendously unimpressed. But so the this segment, what happens is I ask my co-hosts a question, and then they have, they have to answer with the first thing that comes to their mind. And then you guys also get to play along by joining us on Discord. There's a gut check channel on our server, so you can respond to that survey, see what everyone else thinks, and, laugh at them for being wrong. Okay, so my gut check for this week, or my gut check for this episode is, if you could remove one keyword ability from the game of Magic, what would it be? And this is, of course, in a commander context. So, what do you guys think?
Flashback.
Flying.
Dredge.
You're all wrong. Appreciate your answers. The correct answer, of course, is partner.
Hard disagree.
Patting myself on the back, accepting my my trophies, in the mail. Mail, I'm the hero this format needs. Yeah, that's all.
If it was as simple as removing a keyword.
Don't just know about them.
Okay, so let's move on to the final topic, which is stacks in the current cEDH meta. So this is basically where we're going to piggyback off of what we left off with the history of stacks. With the history of stacks in cEDH, just the post partners Hulk unbanned Kaladesh block era. That's, like I said when Sick Robot started talking about that, we're still in Eldrazi Winter. We're still in this hellhole.
This is Westeros, where winters can last for like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. So partners still running rampant, Hulk still running rampant, but stacks is kind of leaking into a bunch of other decks.
Yeah. Well, and also the stacks pieces that see play have definitely, I think, shifted from what was seeing play like immediately after partners got unbanned. Like I think there's been a marked shift.
Yeah, who is running Grafdigger's Cage like at any point previous? Like Grafdigger's Cage is now just like you're like, oh, I can support Grafdigger's Cage, goes in my deck.
One better, good enough. Yep, let's jam that.
Yeah.
But like really at the time, and especially from my experience playing online, I don't know about your guys' specific experience, but even like directly after the partners unban and the partners print and the Hulk unban, there wasn't really like a lot of Hulk going around, or at least not a lot of Flash Hulk going around. Breakfast was definitely a deck that existed. But it hadn't exactly picked up a ton of steam yet.
Yeah, and there weren't like a trillion Hulk variants.
There wasn't the Hulk renaissance as there is now that's happened.
There weren't just
months.
People randomly posting God tier Hulk piles on
Reddit for everybody else to pick up on. So it was like I think it was definitely like less of a consideration. And it was sort of like, yes, this exists, but like I can rely on other people to interact with it or whatever, or like I can just stick a Rip in my deck and Rip will deal with Hulk. Rather than having to dedicate all these slots to it. I think more at the time there was still a real prevalence of ad nauseum decks, just in general. I think ad nauseum it's like it's definitely still a good card now, but at the time, I really think it was like the card to beat. It was sort of like the thing that you put in your deck to make it good. And coming along with that, sort of like on the same axis, Food Chain was also pretty popular. You know, Tazri had recently.
But that deck's dead now, right? Like, who's playing Food Chain anymore?
Definitely not. No.
I will say Food Chain Tazri is definitely not the deck it used to be. It's outclassed a little bit.
It hasn't changed, but it's been very outclassed.
There's been some spicy new Food Chain,
dude. Food Chain Niv. Food Chain Niv is great.
Food Chain.
How could they possibly beat Food Chain Niv? Like there will never be a better Food Chain. Yeah, there'll never be a better Food Chain commander in the history of Magic. Magic going forward right now. I'm just staking that.
You can hold me to my word. It is impossible. It is impossible to print a better Food Chain commander than Food Chain Niv. That being said, so really at the time you have like Adnaz and Food Chain as like the two big archetypes, and like Breakfast Hulk is picking up popularity, but it's not like really the monster that it is now. And both of those
people added Hulk to their character.
Oh yes, definitely. It was just like the threat of being Flash Hulk consistently was just like not at all the oppressive force. And like if you notice, both Adnaz and Food Chain get hit pretty hard by Rule of Law effects, and that was really, I think, like the majority of Stax effects that were seeing play at the time.
Yeah,
it was just like there were. I specifically remember like a lot of people were jamming like 3 Rule of Law effects in their decks, because it just hit like everything.
Nowadays, you've got a lot of resiliency in decks baked in. Like the decks that have kind of rose to the top of the tiers are decks that are quite resilient on many fronts to stacks, and whether or not that's actually a direct reaction to the stacks that we're seeing play in the metas, or if that's just how it is, and then the stacks have been sort of adapted in response to that. You're just seeing this resiliency in decks. So you've got Gitrog and Shuffle Hulk, who are very resilient to single target Grave Hate. So that's something that's, well, it's not really stacked, but it's something that's kind of gone. Gitrog and Shuffle are just both pretty resilient to stacks generally.
Yeah. Like you used to be able to get away with like playing against Carador or playing against like news piles.
Yeah.
You used to be able to get away with playing like a Relic Progenitus or playing with a Tormod's Crypt or the Nikhil Spellbomb.
Yeah.
Now it just doesn't really cut it. You really need like hard Grave Hate, and it can be hard for stack decks that also want to use the graveyard to be able to use those.
There's decks like Gitrog, or who can play around effects like Curse Totem using Cleanup Sculpt or Chains of Mephistopheles. So it's hard to attack them on that front, or Rule of Law, comboing off. Being able to combo off at instant speed is something that's really taken a high priority in the meta, and so Rule of Law just becomes, I always stop you on your turn. Well, I'm going to go try to combo off on the next turn.
Oh, the blue player tried to cast a spell. That's great. I get to platinum response. And then we also see stuff like that is just sort of like naturally Stax resistant to most things as well. Like especially the rise of Consult has been like a huge deal.
Najeela
and
as
like
well.
Najeela as well. And just like these decks that like don't really lose to any stacks. Like Najeela definitely has like some issues with Curse Totem, but like
And Blood Moon.
But like having just like
Druid's Repository, man. Come on.
I've
so
definitely
easy.
like seen Najeela like outbeat Stax decks too, right? Just like in the Beats War.
Yeah.
Like Stax doesn't have time to get Elishnorn on the board, or they don't
You
have
try to
time
establish
go
you
find
try to
something.
establish a lock to shut them off of their main primary win con, and then they're just going to keep beating
Yeah.
in, and
All
growth
the lands
is
are mountains. Like, I saw
exponential
Kess
growth.
with the
Yeah, like Stax, like you spend like your first 3 turns establishing Stax piece to lock up the rest of the table. They spend their first 3 turns going Dark and Najeela swing, and then swing again, and then keep doing that. And then like Consult is just like sort of basically impossible to Stax out. I mean, like you can delay it, but like you're not going to stop it from winning with just Stax a lot of the time.
So I mentioned that Stax is sort of leaking into other decks, and so this is what we were talking about with people Stax as tempo pieces. So like Grafdigger's Cage and Gitrog. Some Xur lists are, on not many of them. I have a list that's on Graph Cage, rest in peace, but many of them are trying to take advantage of Yogg Wheel, so that's not really a possibility. But Aven Mind Sensor, if you can jam it and it's not too costly to your strategy, that
Curse
asymmetrical
Totem,
effect.
and honestly, so many decks now.
Yeah, Curse Totem, Null Rod, those kinds of effects are just getting jammed to take advantage of that tempo swing, and sometimes just like time walking or screwing your opponent's greedy keep, things like that.
Yeah.
And it's like definitely like I think, at least in my personal opinion, it's sort of I think it's like I view it as like a liability to a deck if you can't efficiently play one of Stony Silence or Curse Totem.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you can't just jam one of those profitably and be able to use it against a meta of like that type, then like that's a real issue, because like then you're probably vulnerable to both of those. And there are definitely going to be people jamming those pieces.
And that mentality is what kind of created the current metagame, right? Is like being too vulnerable to stacks means that in a table of 4 players, you're shutting yourself off proactively.
So if we want to go over just a list of some of the Stax commanders or decks that are really seeing play, not just the decks that are running tempo stacks, but the more dedicated Stax decks that are seeing play, because there are still some. But one of the things is that they're not like in eras past. They're not dedicated stacks winning through beats.
Yeah,
You call them dedicated stacks because they have easy access to stacks pieces and they run a lot of them, but they've still got a really solid path to victory.
Yeah.
So Yisan is one where they're running all the spheres, but then they've also just and some of their the things they can find have stacks-like effects.
Yeah. Uses Root Maze very profitably, which is like a difficult thing to find in this current metagame.
But yeah, so Yisan is one of those where I still call it sort of a dedicated stacks deck. Sisse having access to Linvala, and now with new Karn, asymmetrical Null Rod.
Asymmetrical Null Rod and Curse Totem, just like basically like the toolbox access that she has to those is just nuts.
Yeah.
Right?
What's funny about that too is Sisse is vulnerable to both Null Rod and Curse Totem.
But if you can find one-sided versions in the command zone,
great.
So then Bloodpod is something that's kind of actually been moving away from stacks towards the more Metapod.
The new Metapod version is like I think a lot of it was they realized that like no matter really how hard you try, Stax really has a difficult time against Hulk specifically. Mm-hmm. Just like it's hard to get the relevant stacks online in time. And like there's not a lot of stacks pieces that fully shut it off, I think. So like I think what they realized was like we can pivot more and like start using the graveyard instead. Like stop trying to like try to lock it out and just like deny ourselves from using it, and instead use the graveyard and use that as part of our like strategy to try to win the game.
There's self-plug here, Anafenza with a one-sided rest in peace for creatures in the command zone. Pretty solid against Gitrog and Flash Hulk metas, but it has abilities to win, but it it does suffer from, not having that card advantage in the command zone.
And the no blue problem
Yes,
in general.
that's a classic problem. So some we can list some of the decks that have kind of been phased out. So Duretti, not really, that got phased out with Partial Paris.
Duretti hasn't really been a big driving force in the meta for a long time now.
Brago, I guess.
Brago still sort of exists. I think there's definitely exploration to be done with Brago. He is one of the few blue-white commanders that actually has a decently solid win condition. As opposed to when you look at stuff even Tigum is the next highest up that list, and Tigum still has a lot of issues.
Grand Arbiter is one that also has a Stax piece in the command zone, but does struggle to win the game.
I think Brago is probably where you want to go if you actually want to brew a Stax deck in blue white that can win the game. Brago and Grand Arbiter, the big ones.
Rukthar doesn't see that much play anymore. Nath, not so much. Derevi, not so much.
Pongo's holding out, man. They're making updates.
Some people have been on Aminatu Stax. Is that right?
Give it a shot.
I think so.
I've seen a bunch of people play it.
There's a lot of new cards that are fun in that deck, and to brew with, I think it generally is pretty weak because it isn't really a value engine.
Yeah.
Also,
it does break its parity well, but it's not really.
She's just even by Planeswalker standards, she's very fragile.
Yeah,
and you don't want to be putting random cards in your deck to block for your commander.
Yeah. I think the one good thing about her though is that she's in Esper and she can pretty
good colors.
Yeah, it's good colors, and you can also pretty effectively run Humility.
Oh yeah, that's definitely
right.
There's some decks that have been experimenting with Humility. We mentioned, I think, last episode the Oman deck, which is a Loro Humility mid-range ad nauseum, and so and then some Zur decks have been testing with Humility.
The other version of Oman.
Yeah.
The one with the Necropotence in the command zone.
Yeah. Also lots of solid Stax pieces in the command zone.
Yeah.
If you can just find, Rest in Peace, Rule of Law, Back to Basics, whatever the meta calls for.
I think Vortex is a good one because you don't have to sacrifice the land when you play it.
Yeah. True.
I think Zur Stax is I think it probably is pretty good. I think just historically, people that have built Zur Stax have just been I'm going to play every single Stax piece I can get my hands on. I'm playing all the orbs. I'm playing Trinosphere. I'm playing whatever the one that makes all the stuff come in tapped is. I'm as deep as I can go on Stax pieces. That's the one. Kismet 2 will jam all of it.
So actually one thing that's not on this list that we've got in our show notes, but I wanted to mention is that Godo has actually been transitioning towards more of a Staxy build. So when Helm the Host was first announced, my first brew for the Godo deck was Godo Helm Stax, and many of the other people who are in charge of the primer now, who is Tony S and Insert Clever Freeze here, are actually they were on a much more focused linear build. But actually, many more Stax pieces are getting added into Godo. So talk of Tabernacle getting added in, and 3-ball Trinosphere, and some other spheres potentially. So it's really slowing down to try to be more adaptive on the Stax front, because it actually does break parity pretty well in those.
I think it's actually a pretty good direction. I don't think I was ever really in love with the idea of trying to race in mono red with an 11 mana combo. You're in the color of rituals, but
dude,
I was never
Trees and Soaker, man.
I was never a huge fan of trying to race ad nauseum and flash.
Yeah, but slamming spheres or dropping Clasms and stuff.
Yeah,
solid.
Yeah. As long as you still have the high impact stuff that actually gets you to your combo, and if you can fit the Stax pieces in, I think it's probably a pretty neat direction to take it in.
Okay, I think that about wraps up the... do we want to... Let's just answer these two quick questions before we move on to the next topic, which is, why is Stax good right now? Anyone want to jump in on this one?
I think Stax as an archetype has lost a bit, but I think Stax pieces individually have gained a lot of play. I think like Stax is really good right now just because like the ability to target your meta like really like focused in a focused way, focused manner, and like just be able to play like these high impact pieces for like low mana cost, low investment that just like shut off the rest of the table really easily, and then you still get to do your thing. Like I think that's still a very powerful thing to be able to do, and I think it's a good argument for why Stax pieces are still good.
Well, it also kind of works like in this very explosive and often tempo driven meta. Stax pieces kind of function like temporary X for ones. Like if you shut off all of your opponent's dorks, maybe you're shutting off 5 cards from them, and yes, eventually they remove your curse totem and they get them back, but for 3 turns you were up 2 cards on each opponent for one of yours, and so if you can win in that turn based on that advantage, then
interestingly,
it doesn't matter that the advantage was only temporary.
With Stax is that if it's a let's say something like a graph cage, and there's a Yisan and a Hulk player in that pod, you kind of get into stalemates where each is kind of reluctant to remove it preemptively.
Remove it, I dare you.
Yeah.
So, okay, here's my secret meta tech for the 4-way Hulk mirror, is you play Grafdigger's Cage, and then nobody ever wants to remove it, because they know as soon as they tap the mana to remove it, everybody else is flashing on top of it.
Oh,
so
man,
it's like,
level.
even if you play like a ley line, right? Like, even if you can win through it, nobody else wants to remove it, because they know as soon as they remove it, everybody else is unlocked too.
Yeah.
There you go.
Noel, do you have anything to say on why is Stax good?
Yeah, I think I kind of have just a comment about Stax, and it's more that the Stax decks have moved away from being fully saturated with Stax, and it's more spread out between decks, so it's more of a disperse Stax meta, and that kind of that speaks to the whole idea of like cornering the metagame.
When you add up all the stacks that everyone has in their deck, it's basically like there's a 5th player at the table playing Stax.
It's still the same amount. Actually, coincidentally, I think that is actually like a cool thing for Stax going forward, is that like the more people that pick up Stax pieces to put in their decks just for value, the better dedicated Stax actually becomes, because
you can take all the Stax pieces out.
because the whole thing is like Stax has always had that problem where like you need, like a lot of time you need somebody else's help at the table
We've
to
a stable equilibrium of Stax
to slow down the game, right? And
super
like
saturated meta solution of
right now people are doing
Early
that.
on,
People are helping you to establish a slower game at the table.
Yeah,
so
you go to cast Rest in Peace, someone tries to counter it, someone will counter the counter. Yeah. And then question here, why is Stax bad right now?
I mean, my answer is Flash Hulk, but
I mean, Flash Hulk is a part of it, and it's just that
hyper fast
win conditions are so fast, and like with 4 colors and just the focus on slot efficiency, everyone's deck is so efficient that you can't hold people down for long enough to have a concise, inefficient, like to have a low card count, inefficient win plan actually go off before somebody finds a way through your stacks. There's just like, because now everyone can play the tutors from black and the counterspells from blue and, green dorks and still have another color and not be limited to only Sultai generals. Everyone can find their way through stacks faster. So if your goal is to hold everyone down until you can win, you have to be winning quickly.
yeah.
I've got one final question on this topic for you guys, and it relates to the title of this episode. Should you be playing Stacks right now? I think based off our discussion here, my answer is yes. Run the Stacks pieces that you can get away with.
Yeah. Like you should be playing Stacks pieces,
Not stacks.
not Stacks decks.
That's a good way to sum it up.
Also, they're not as fun to goldfish while we record. So
Oh, yeah.
right now, don't be playing them.
Don't.
Okay, so we've got a final kind of mini topic, which is what will Stacks look like going forward? And I'll kick things off by saying this is really hard to tell because this changes depending on new cards that get released in sets. whether or not the RC finally decides to listen to all my jabberings on Twitter and finally ban Flash. I'm trying, guys. You know Worm Tongue from Lord of the Rings. He's whispering into the Rohan, King of Rohan here.
Theoden.
I'm just like in all the CAG members' Twitter feeds, like just ban Flash.
I just
unban prime time.
I imagine you walking into the hall of Sheldon trying to get to unban prime time and him just saying, "You have no power here."
Okay, so anyone else have any comments on Stax going forward?
Well, I for one have a sneaking suspicion. I don't know why. It's just a hunch. I have a sneaking suspicion that for some reason rule of law effects are going to pick up steam really soon for some reason. I don't know. They're not really good against Hulk decks or anything like that, but I feel like we could see a big resurgence of
I could also see maybe some like
archetypes.
hate bears seeing play that, or maybe more null rods, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I get it. Actually, I think Curse Totem is probably a better idea going forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I think I will agree with me on this point.
I agree with myself twice on this one.
Okay, so Spleen, anything, or shall we move on?
Yeah, I think that people are going to be moving even more towards, like, Stax is going to have to become an even more meta call, so it's going to be hard to play Stax into a blind meta. And yeah, the pieces that hit existing decks hard and are reasonably easy to play around are going to start appearing in as many decks as can safely run them. And it's going to be interesting until we hit the next big change. It's possible maybe we'll get some more. I mean, we have Jace, but now some more planeswalkers that make humility viable. I can see the rules committee doing something there, or Wizards printing a planeswalker commander that can actually play humility effectively.
Maybe printing I think something that could happen would be printing like some cheap black based commander that breaks parity really easily on some effects. I think like a green black based commander, like maybe tack on an extra color that happens to break parity on
a green black blue commander that draws cards when lands enter the graveyard from anywhere.
I'd love to see a new Jund commander.
Maybe something that I don't know, combos with Teferi's Puzzle Box or something like that, something that stops people from drawing cards and helping with the Timberland medicine.
Never freely evolved. Okay, so we'll get into our listener question. So this episode, ASO/Aaron asks, is it correct to stop a player's value/draw engine instead of saving your interaction for protecting your future combo, or to stop another player's combo attempt?
ASO, stop interacting with my draw engine.
God, I just want to resolve a compost. Why can't you let me resolve a compost?
I think that countering a Sylvan Library is probably a good idea.
Yes. Maybe not with the Force of Will. But maybe with the Force.
I don't know. It certainly depends.
Definitely with the Spell Pierce.
It really does depend on the pod, though. I think you do need to read on how long the game is going to go, because if you're like, man, this game is going to be over, I'm just Sick Robot has Flash Hulk. He's a massive luck sack. I can just tell. And
he has that smirk on his face.
He's trying to convince me to tap out. So I know he has it, but yeah. So
he's talking at me to Flash.
He played his Grapdigger's Cage. He's waiting for everyone to destroy it.
So that's when you want to sandbag your interaction for the win. If you've got a hard read on someone having a win, or they're going to make a combo attempt, but otherwise, if the game is going to be protracted, I think that it's pretty real to counter someone's or remove someone's value engines. It feels weird. I don't know if I'd go so far as to counter Bob, or that one card a turn. Probably not.
I think I would remove Bob. I don't think I would counter Bob.
I think I don't know if I'd Path a Bob. Or Swords a Bob.
I think so. I think it's for me, a lot of the time, like, I think...
I'd sword the Bob if it's a Timna player with the Bob.
There we go.
I think, like, and, like, this sounds like a very specific situation, but, like, just from, like, me playing some amount of Colour Rashmi a fair amount, like, going to grind games, this is, like, one that actually happens a fair amount. The situation that I end up countering value engines in a lot is one player bricks or is going to have a very hard time winning the game. The other one is somehow being shut down by like a Stax at the table or somebody else obviously having the exact correct interaction to shut them down.
Yeah.
And then me and somebody else are fighting the war to try to draw the most cards. And specifically in that situation, like, it's very, very likely that I'm going to, like, remove a Timna. I'm going to, like, if they try to play Heuristic Study, I'm just going to be like, no, I need to counter this so I can keep ahead in the card war.
Mm-hmm.
Where, like, I think it's a lot of the time, it's like, I will counter a value engine. Like, it's, the closer the game is to a 1v1, the more likely I am to counter a value engine a lot of the time.
No, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think my thoughts exactly. Almost like I think the closest you get to a racing situation is when you have to think about short or making your opponent's wheels smaller.
I suppose also just obvious play is obvious. Misstep the Remora. Don't save the misstep for like.
No,
I'm waiting for the Boreal.
You obviously have to misstep my turn 1 carrion feeder. Why would you ever save a mental misstep?
Yeah.
I would misstep your turn.
And I know you would.
I don't think that's wrong. I wouldn't hit a Llanowar elf, but I would hit a carrion.
Would you? Okay, well, okay. But where's the line there? Would you hit a Deathrite Shaman?
If I was playing a deck that really cared about Deathrite Shaman,
Sure,
maybe.
okay.
But
And
no,
if the store's about to close, you mental misstep. It's divine top.
Anyone have anything else to say, or do you think we've about covered this?
I guess I would just say that it's very obvious when you lose to not having a counterspell for someone's win condition.
Yeah.
It's a lot less obvious when you lose because they drew 5 cards that they didn't have to. Right?
Yeah.
If you counter their ad nauseum and they counter back, I mean, it's possible that they wouldn't have had the ad nauseum. It's also possible that they wouldn't have had the counterspell, and then you still would have been in the same situation, but if somebody else had interaction or something like that.
Even the mana to cast the ad
Or
nauseam in
even
the
the
first
mana
place.
to cast the ad nauseum. So there's all sorts of... Like, it's very easy to look at the cards that actually end the game and not look at how they got into your opponent's hand.
Yeah. I see it a lot with... I mean, like, this isn't anybody's
It's a get robbed
specific
monster.
that no. But like, I'll see a lot of people just from my experience on Shovel Hulk. I will sit on a Timna for like 4 turns and be drawing at least 2 cards every turn, and then I go for the win and I have a Packed Force and a Flusterstorm, and people will be like, "He just had it. There's no way we could have beaten him that game. Like, he just drew the exact correct cards," and it's like.
Make his Timna cost 5
I drew
mana.
20 cards.
And it's
Of
like,
course I found the ones
It's
I
like, no,
needed.
because I didn't win with the Flash. I won with the other pieces that I drew. Like, I had a sack outlet in play. It was easy to draw and literally anything. And then I got to dedicate my tutors to finding interaction because you guys let me draw with a Timna this entire time, right? Whereas, like, it's very easy to write that off as I got luck sacked by Flash Hulk. And he had, like, all the counter magic and we couldn't do anything about it. But, like, if you look at the stuff behind that, it's like, well, you let me, like, you guys tapped out on these specific turns. You let me get in with Timna. You didn't analyze that, like, some of the tutors that I was getting may have been going for protection instead of combo pieces. Yeah, basically just agreeing with what Spleen said.
Yeah, easy. Just so Spleen, our next listener question.
Our next listener question comes from Meepomatic, and it is, besides getting your reps in, do you have any strategies or exercises that promote your growth as a player?
Push-ups, sit-ups.
100-kilometer run every day.
Yeah.
Jumping jacks.
Don't turn the AC on in the summer, and don't turn the heat on in the winter.
Yeah.
Cold showers.
Yeah.
Drink your school, don't do milk. Go to drugs.
Okay.
Really, I think a really big one for me anyway is just being thinking about games after they finish. I know like a lot of people, like even I do this whenever I'm just hopping online to play games. Like you just play an autopilot. You just like you're just talking with people. You're playing a deck. You chose some, like, you roulette the wheel on whatever decks you have open online, and you're just like, yeah, dude, pick this one, play it.
So does this extend to laying awake at night thinking about your punts?
Oh gosh.
Well, you should just don't punt.
Yeah.
I could have just killed the Tim now, right then.
You should be spending an hour every day meditating on your mistakes. No, but just like actively, when a game finishes, actively put thought into, if you won, why did you win? Not just like, I cast a flash, I won the game, or I cast the Gitrog monster, hey, I won the game. Why? Like, what sequence of events led to you winning that game, right?
My opponent's throwing TBH.
Like, if your opponent's tapped out and they all misplayed and you won, like, great, cool. But like, make sure that you're acknowledging that every time, right? So like, make sure that like, yeah, like, if the 3 people before you tapped out, and you're like, this is a smart time to jam my commander and win the game. Great, just like internalize that. And if it's a lot more complicated than that, then like, maybe like you don't have to go through the entire game. You don't have to like watch replays if you don't want to. Just like think about like, yeah, like what are alternate lines? Why did I win? Why did I lose? What led to me winning or losing? Da-da-da-da.
Another thing that I really like to focus on is trying to put myself in the headspace of my opponents. So when I'm playing games, or sometimes I watch streams or whatever, I try and come up with winning lines for them. For example, like I wouldn't necessarily say them, but I would think, okay, they're casting a demonic tutor. What would they find here that would really like lock up the game? Thinking about what they're likely to interact with, what they're not likely to interact with, and then why they might be making certain decisions, and just if you pay close attention to what everyone's doing, it's almost like you're playing 4 games for every one game you play. Because
also,
you get an exposure to how certain decks play and how certain players play.
You also just look super sick when they resolve a demonic tutor, and before they cast their spell, you just call exactly what they're going to do.
Personally, actually, I make it a game out of just calling what people are tutoring, because it's the greatest. It's so much fun.
I do the same thing.
And
it's a good practice for reading what your opponents have in hand.
A lot of the time, like,
it really fucks
and the best part is, if you call it correct, people will tutor another thing to spite you. Yeah. So you're winning anyway.
Yeah, we call this game Glasses of Urza.
Yeah. Null, what about you?
Yeah, for myself, I try to look at other people's deck lists and try to playtest decks I've never playtested before, except Gitrog. Because it's way too complex in my shell of mine.
So for me, what I do a lot of is just brewing decks, grinding on Scryfall or Deck Builder or whatever, just going through cards, thinking about combo lines, and kind of I do, or at least until I figured out the 60-step loop for Anafenza, I would think about that every night while I was falling asleep. It was the equivalent of counting sheep.
First, you have to come up with the notations.
Yeah. And one night it just hit me, and so I had it. But yeah, so like just thinking about loops, thinking about lines. I know before I did that, I thought about when I was learning Yisan, I just did Yisan verse lines while going to bed. It's a great way to fall asleep, okay? But yeah, so then it helps you, like, it becomes second nature when you just think about it all the time, right? Or like you're going through your deck list, really justifying every single card choice, playing games of Magic in your head. You're like, when is this useful? And and evaluating all these cards, thinking about your deck. I very, very rarely goldfish. And I still think I can come up with pretty solid deck decisions just based off my own methodology. And it really helps me kind of have a really solid understanding of my deck. And then when I do this for other decks, helps me understand my opponent's decks as well, which is why you can kind of predict what they're going to do. And that's a massive advantage in cEDH.
I actually think I'm on the other side of goldfishing, where like I goldfish a lot, but like I don't really do it productively. But like I think it can be productive when like I'll do like if I have just like shuffle sitting in front of me, just like sleeved up. I'll like if I'm in a practice game online and like people are taking their turns, I'll just goldfish hands of shuffle while people are like taking their turns and doing stuff or like searching their library, right? Just like playing through whatever.
Yeah, a goldfishing strategy I have is when I look at a hand and I try to think, if I could replace one card in my hand with a card that's not in my deck, could I win the game right now?
Yeah, that's solid.
That's a great one.
And it's like, Okay, that's my cut. That's my include.
Yeah, that's more on the deck building side when you're considering deck choices. Also, when you're playing, be aware, kind of do like a little mental substitution. Like, think about a card that you're considering adding, thinking how often is it that you wished you could have tutored it. If you're looking at a couple potential cards for the cut, think about those cards, like a specific hate piece. Do you ever tutor for it? Or is it just like, oh, I drew it and it was kind of nice, but it doesn't seem worth it for me to look for a Curse Totem in my, I don't know, Kess deck or something like that. So be aware when you're thinking about substitutions and changes that you want to make. Try and sort of synthetically evaluate how the change would affect your deck when you are playing a game.
The baby board is really where the most important decisions happen.
Yeah. That was actually a really solid question because I'm surprised that we all had different, like solidly different answers, and they were all very good answers, and I think they could be helpful to lots of our listeners out there.
To be clear, though, getting your reps in is also a great way.
Yeah.
like
Just establish a play group.
Just jamming hundreds of games
Play
online
online,
is
yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Do it.
Okay, so that about wraps it up for this episode. If you guys would like to reach us with any questions, comments, or concerns, you can contact us on Twitter at IntoTheNorthPod, via our email, intothenorthpodcast@gmail.com, or on our Discord server, the invite link for which can be found in the description for this episode. An extra special thanks to all of our patrons who help cover the expenses for our show and allow us to work towards improving the quality of the podcast. If you too would like to become a patron, we are at patreon.com/IntoTheNorthPodcast. Thank you as always to the band Vox Cadre for our lovely podcast music, and to Nate Slover for our equally lovely podcast logo. Next episode will be out very, very soon, and that will be our set review of Modern Horizons. Woo-hoo! Until then, see ya.